Where should we start? Okay, what's the first question? Ava. You want to do one of the homework problems from worksheet 2? Sure. Do you have one in particular? Do 3. Okay. Yeah, they take a minute to get the hang of, for sure. Okay, so number 3 says construct a sinusoid, so it wants a sine or cosine function, but then it says using cosine. So it's telling us we want our equation to be a cosine equation. It says the amplitude is 4, which right away tells us that the A is either plus or minus 4, right? It says the period is 4 pi. So the C should be 2, right? If I divide both sides by 2 pi, 4 pi divided by 2 pi is just 2. And we always choose the C to be positive. And then we said we have to pass through the point -6, -9. Now, does it tell me whether that point is a maximum or a minimum or a midline point or any of those things? No. So I get to choose where that point goes on my function. Since we're doing a cosine equation, should I pick that point to be a minimum, a maximum, or a midline? Maximum is what I would choose. Why would I do that? Because on my parent function for cosine, I always use the point 0, 1, which is going to be a maximum. My resultant function is going to be the point -9, -6, which we're going to call a maximum. We're choosing it to be a maximum. That's where we're going to put it on our function, is so that it falls where the maximum is. Since these are both maxes, what does that tell me? Since those are both maxes, what does that tell me? It tells me about the sign of A, that A should be positive, yes. Well, we should really say if they're both the same.
So min or mid.
Or the same type of midline point, even if you're doing a sine function. So that's what we use to conclude that. Yes, Sydney? Well, this is always the same. For every time you're using a cosine function, yes. Then you're using 0, 0, which is a midline point.
What about tangent?
We haven't talked about tangent yet.
Sorry.
That's okay. We're still doing that. We're still going here. Okay, what's up?
Why did you decide to put the resulting function as maximum?
Because it seemed easier. Because now they matched. Well, it didn't tell me what kind of, excuse me, guys. It didn't tell me what kind of point -6, -9 had to be. So I got to choose where I wanted that to fall in my function. Did I want it to be a minimum or a maximum or a midline point or something else? I chose it to be a maximum because I'm using a cosine function. And the point for my parent function I want to use is also a maximum. So that involved like no less negative signs, like it was just made life easier. That's why I chose it to do that. If you would have chose it to be a minimum, then you could make the A negative, and that would be fine. You would not want to choose it to be a midline point because that's going to muck everything up a lot. Because we're doing a cosine function, you really need it to be a max or a min. Could you still do it? Yeah, but it like your A now doesn't become obvious what the sign should be. Your H is not free, like it's going to be free here for a second. It just makes life a lot more difficult. So let's not do that. If we're given a cosine or using a cosine, you always want to use mins and maxes. Okay? Or if you're given mins and maxes, you want to use a cosine function. Okay. So we have A and C now, right? We also have H here for free because the parent function's x-coordinate is 0. The resultant function's x-coordinate is just going to be H. Every time that would be true.
Is it always the resulting functions?
Mm-hmm. Yep. The point from the resulting function's x that you're using will just be your H. That's why we're using 0, 1 for cosine and 0, 0 for sine, is so that that x-coordinate in the parent function is 0. So the H is basically just the x-coordinate from the resultant. Sydney? It will not be the -9. It would be if it was 0, 0, but here we have 0, 1. Right? If you're doing a sine function, then yes, that would be true. But because this is 0, 1, it's not. So let's talk about how we get k. So remember, to get the points in our resultant function, we transform the points from our parent function using cx plus h, ay plus k, right? That's what we use to graph. So if I do 0, 1, we know c, that's 2. We know h, that's -6. We know a, that's 4. We know y is 1. We don't know what k is, but after we do that, we need to get the point -6, -9. Then ask a question. Okay, go back to when you weren't confused. Where were you not confused at?
We're using that to get the K.
We're trying to find k right now, yes.
I thought it was going to go from 1 to -9.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I'm gonna just be-
so what we're going to have is 4 times 1 plus k has to equal -9.
just do like
So,
add 1 to -9.
because that's not going to give you the answer. So let's talk about, stop, hold on. Let's just back up, okay? Let's just back up. Try to make this, remind us what we've done so far. Reagan?
How did you know?
Because it told us to use a cosine function. Whenever I'm using cosine, I'm going to use the point 0, 1, which is a maximum. Is that? Oh, okay. All right. So let's just back up. Let's just back up in general, okay? When we graphed, we transform the points of our parent function to the points in our resultant function by using this transformation map, right? This was one of these things that we said you need to write this down, needs to go on your note card, this transformation map,
Yeah.
right? Like when we went and plotted points. Right? You remember doing this from before? 1 second, please. Let me complete the whole thought before we bombard me with a question, because I have a feeling it'll probably get covered with the explanation. But we remember doing this, right? When we graphed, this was the tool that we used to graph. We're using that same idea here. So we have the point 0, 1 as a parent function. And that is turning into the point -6, -9, our resultant function. Okay? We're trying to go and figure out now how 1 is turning into -9. Well, it's doing that by doing a times y plus k. That's how 1 is turning into -9. Well, the y in this case is 1, right? Because that was where we started at. So the k then should be -9 minus a, right? I'm just subtracting a from both sides, right? Just doing like pre-algebra level algebra to do that. So what's the a in our case? Was 4, right? So our k should be -13. Where did I get the 4 from?
From the other.
So you're using your A for that?
Okay. Yeah.
Right?
Are we gonna have to remember the equation or the X and Y equation?
Okay. There's just a lot.
Can we scroll back down so
A lot of talking going on right now, which is hard for me to kind of follow because there's a lot of side chatter going on. I'm listening though. So let's try these one at a time. And if you're not the one that's supposed to be talking right now, let's try to not say anything, okay? Mary, go.
So I guess I'm like, so you're using the A for the you're using the amplitude for A, but
Yeah, you just plug it in. It's like all ay plus k equals -9. So then you already have that and you already have y. And then you just go find out k.
Now, what makes this particular one difficult that Ava chose is that normally in this situation, you would not want to pick cosine.
Why is that?
Because if I picked to use sine, our parent function point is 0, 0. So our h is -6 and our k is just -9. You get them both for free. So you don't have to do finding the k the way that we just did it. Now, the reason I put this homework problem on here is to show you why you want to be smart about which type of function you're choosing to use for the problem, because you can make your life considerably easier if you're using sine when you're given midline points or not designated what kind of points you're given, or if you're using cosine when you're given mins and maxes. Those two things make life massively easier if you're able to keep that straight. It makes life, everything goes much smoother. If you try to use cosine when you're given a midline point or not a point where you haven't designated what it is, finding the k becomes cumbersome. And even finding h could become cumbersome. If you try to use sine when you're given mins and maxes, finding the h and k become really cumbersome. You have to do the algebra thing that we did here to the side, which is like not tremendously difficult to do, but unnecessary if you chose to use the function that's better suited to the information that you're given. Okay? Ava, did I hit your question when I know I'd asked you to hold on for a second.
Yeah, so how would you do sine? How would you figure out what function is best for the information?
So if this wasn't told to use cosine, I would use sine because we're not told what kind of point -6, -9 is.
So what would the point?
So I would pick it to be a midline point, the same as the parent function midline point.
It
So
would be like a period or amplitude.
I'm sorry, what?
Like,
The period and amplitude aren't going to affect which one I would pick to do sine or cosine.
oh,
That has no bearing. I only care about what kind of point I'm given. Yes.
CX plus H, but then you're just using the AY plus K to find the K?
Yeah,
Okay. Then what's the other part of it?
that's how we would get the -6. But we already know C and H.
Yeah.
So what do we need that part for? We don't. So I'd ignored it.
Okay.
Sydney.
Are we gonna have to remember the CX plus H, AY plus K formula?
Tell you what, I'll write it down for you.
Hell yeah.
Okay?
Alright. You're doing another problem.
Yes. Which one would you like to do?
Any, I don't really mind.
I think should we do one with the mids and
Just one?
Yeah, let's do one of those. One with the mids and maxes. Ugh, this stupid thing. There we go. All right.
what should I be? What should I be?
Let's do 6. All right. If I'm doing 6,
Yeah.
find the equation of a sinusoid function that has a maximum value at -210 and a minimum value at -14, -18. What type of function should I choose, sine or cosine?
what?
You're given mins and maxes.
It's always cosine.
You want to use cosine. Mins and maxes cosine. Nothing
Is sine?
or midpoint or midline point is sine. So if you're given nothing, the point could be anywhere, pick sine.
This is a hard one.
No, it doesine have to
Use
be.
cosine.
If you use cosine, you're fine.
But I thought on the other one, if you use.
Well, it's because it was the improper time to be using cosine. It should have been a sine problem,
They tried to trick us.
but they told you to use. I told you to use cosine for it to show you why choosing the right function makes life easier.
If you did that on the test and we just like happened to use the other one, I knew it was better. I don't know. I heard you.
You get partial for sure. Sure.
How many points are on this?
Homework quizzes are always graded out of 10 based on demonstration of understanding.
Yeah, please. Like, please. I'm trying to be.
Just everybody take a deep breath.
I'm so difficult.
We just do this problem.
This is
I want you to understand something, okay?
Hey, shh. Shut up.
Do you remember the syllabus?
Yes.
What percent of your grade comes from the homework quizzes?
10.
10% is it. What is the homework worth?
5.
25. What is the final exam? 15. What is the homework or the test?
The rest of it.
The rest of it, which is like 40, I think, right? Which is the most. Relative to these, and then the homework quiz. What happens at the end of the semester?
They get deducted.
I get at least one that's dropped.
A homework quiz or-
Yeah.
All quizzes?
All the homework quizzes, at least one is dropped.
Yeah.
Okay. And then how are these graded? Am I grading strictly right and wrong on total points?
By demonstration.
Demonstration of understanding. So how easy is it to get a 7?
It's pretty difficult.
Really easy, right? Like you can do almost nothing right, but if you have like the right idea somewhere, I can give you a 7. Okay? So like, can you fail a homework quiz short of just leaving it blank? Probably not.
How could you get a 1?
I don't think I would ever give you a 1, to be honest with
If I
you.
wrote my name on the bench,
I thought I was gonna like a 0 or something.
I think I've given out like 6s and 5s before, but it was like somebody that just like was not even in the ballpark, and you wrote stuff down. But like you didn't like. What class is this for? I don't know, but it wasn't this one. Kind of work.
At least
But
you
like-
tried.
But like it's rare. That might happen like once or twice a semester.
Okay.
Okay? So like these homework quizzes. Let's not freak out. Just take a deep breath. Let's do this one together now.
Oh, yes, let's do it.
Okay? Because we've been dancing around this now for a while you guys have been like scattered all over the place.
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's just kind of calm down and try to focus hard on this one right here, right now. Okay?
No, we're still again.
So it says we have a maximum value at negative 210, and then a minimum value at 14, negative 18. So I'm going to just like draw a little picture of kind of what's going on.
Stand up.
Everybody okay with that? That's just a picture, right? I went ahead and finished drawing the whole period, right? One cycle of the graph. The midline should be somewhere around there, right? Halfway in between negative 18 and positive 10. What number is halfway in between?
8, 7, 56,
I don't know.
10 plus 18. 28. 14. This is 4.
Negative 4. Right? If I count down 4 units from the top, I'm at 0. If I count up 10 units from the bottom, I'm at negative 8. Halfway between 0 and 8 is 4. But because it's 0 and negative 4, it's negative 4.
What's the equation for this one?
So I did the y max plus y min divided by 2. The y coordinate from the maximum plus the y coordinate from the minimum divided by 2. Just halfway in between them. It's like a midpoint, right? Everybody's okay?
Yep.
And again, if you can draw the picture, you could like literally count, right? I'm just going to go like 1 from each direction. So like 10 goes to 9, negative 18 goes to negative 17, and just keep going until you meet. That's the thing in the middle. You could literally count if you needed to, right? Okay. The amplitude is like this distance, right?
So it's
So that's half the distance between 10 and 18.
14.
So how far is it between 10 and 18? 10 and negative 18.
14.
28 units, right?
14.
Half of that is 14.
You got that?
Amplitude?
You
Oh,
got it.
God. I like, what did it say in here?
You been writing that down in there?
So the A should be either plus or minus 14.
No, yeah, I knew it was.
So everyone, so far so good.
Yeah.
Now let's try to figure out the period and with that the C value. So here to here would be like 1 period, right? But we only know from there to there, right? From the max to the min. What percent of the period does it appear that we can see? 50% or half. Great.
32.
So half the period is going to be the distance from -2 to +14. How far is it from -2 to +14? 16 units, right?
12, yep, 12.
So one period then should be 32. Everybody's okay with that?
I'm rocking with it.
So,
And I know a period is 2 pi absolute value c. So if I divide both sides by 2, I get 16 over pi. And I'll choose that to be c, to be positive.
so how do you?
Where does 16 come from?
Yeah.
32 divided by 2 pi, 32 divided by 2 is 16.
But where's the 32 bit?
32 is a period.
But halfway. How do we know that?
Because we just did it.
Well, half of the period was 16, so a whole period is twice that,
How did we get?
32.
Yeah, wait, how did we?
Yeah, how do we get this here?
16 is
Okay,
half
can we
32.
just stop? Focus, okay? How did I get the 16? Half of the period was the distance from -2 to +14
Oh, okay.
in the x's. So I went 2 units to 0, and then 14 more units gives us 16 total. Again, all I'm doing is trying to count. Okay? So we have K. We have C. And we have plus or minus A. We need 2 more things, right? We need to figure out whether A is positive or negative, and we need the H.
Yeah.
So our parent function is cosine. What is the point that we use when we're using cosine? 0, 1. What kind of point is that? Maximum. Every time we use cosine, that's the point from our parent function we're going to choose. Every time it's a maximum. From our resultant function, we can pick either the minimum at -210 or the maximum at 14, -18. Which one would you like to choose? Well, I heard somebody say -210 to start, but it doesn't really matter.
I whispered it.
Okay. Since we're changing from max to min, what does that tell us? The A value is negative. Everybody's okay with that? If you'd chosen the minimum or the maximum to use, the A value would need to be positive. Everybody's okay? Yes, Colin?
To get the A and the A now for the amp one, it's the same as K, it's just minus, right? Instead of adding.
Yes. Because it's a distance rather than a midway. Okay. And then because the x-coordinate on our parent function is 0,
2.
the x-coordinate for our resultant function is going to be our h. Now we have everything we need. Yes. It was,
Oh, so it doesn't matter?
it told us in the problem that it was a minimum. So you could have you used the maximum? Yes. The sign for A is going to change and the value for H will be different, but you could have used that point as well and still had a correct answer.
Is one easier?
Nope,
Wait,
not really.
that kind of thing, though. It says maximum value.
Oh, sorry. Yes, your excellent point.
Hell yeah.
Thanks, Bladen.
Max twice?
Well, I misread the problem. Negative 210 was the maximum, so it should be positive
One
14.
the same as
Look,
positive.
I think it's.
Yes.
The point is.
So I have A times cosine of 1 over C, which would be 1 over 16 over pi, but I'm not going to write it that way. How am I going to write it? Pi over 16. And then I have x minus h. Again, I'm not going to write minus a negative. I'm just going to write plus k.
Wait, why is it?
Huh?
Why is it?
It's,
Positive 2, because it was minus a negative. Minus a negative, so I just wrote it as positive. Delaney.
Why is it 14? I understand why it's like positive, negative. But why? How do we get?
We figured that out earlier. When we looked at half the distance between 10 and...
Okay, yeah, I got it.
Okay.
I should put the two A's together.
Oh, okay. Ava.
So we took the formulas to get into the period, K and the letters. And then we put it into the resultant function, and then we just circle what you circled.
Yeah.
When did we get the kid?
Okay.
That was the very first thing that we figured out.
When you use the formulas, like how to find amplitudes.
Finding the.
Well, it's just like half the distance between the two. You can literally count, right? Like what's the distance between 10 and negative 18? If you draw a number line, you have negative 10 over here, and you have positive 18 over here. How far is that? You can count, right? 1, 2, 10, 11, 12, 28 when you get to the end, right? Like that's all you're doing. Just half of that distance. Is that okay? So you'd literally draw a number line and count if you needed to.
That's for.
That's the amp. If you're doing the K, that's the midpoint. So you can just again, literally count and see what's in the middle. Right? What's in...
The last sentence. Sorry. What?
Oh, I put these on the wrong thing. That should be negative 18 and positive 10, whatever.
Wait, so for the other one, for K, we did the equation. Correct?
It's the same thing.
Okay,
It's
I
the
won't ask the question then.
no. I'm sorry.
Understand.
I'm sorry. I'm just. I feel like I'm saying the same thing over and over again. I'm sorry.
just trying to
No.
understand.
I listen. Look, I was wrong. I shouldn't have lost my temper there. You're not doing anything wrong. You can ask questions. I don't want to dissuade you from doing
I
that.
understand.
I apologize.
Yeah, it's okay.
This is the third class in a row that it's just been bombarding with questions that feel like I'm just everyone's interrupting and talking on the side, and it's very distracting for me, and it's very distracting for you guys, and it's very frustrating for me because I feel like I'm answering the same question 3 times in a row because nobody's listening to any question other than their question. My answer to you, Mary, is counting is the same thing as I've done on the formula.
Is the AY plus K the same thing?
The AY plus K.
Or the AY plus, because we did for the other one, for finding the K, we did the CX plus H, AY plus K.
You should never have to do that if you choose to use the appropriate sine or
So we're not-
cosine for the appropriate
Yeah,
problem.
whatever one you
If
choose.
you chose to use sine to do this problem, you'd have to do that for both the H and the K.
Okay.
Let's not do that though.
So for.
That's why the first thing we asked was should we use sine or cosine?
Yes.
Because we don't want to have to do that because it's kind of confusing. Is that okay? Thank you. I'm sorry. Again, Nora. Of course. Ellie, go. It's fine.
Alright, let's take this.
Sure. Just don't do it while you're still here. Delaney.
When do you know if you use sine and cosine? When you have to do that?
Okay.
Max and mins.
If I'm given maxes and mins, I would choose cosine. If I'm given midline points, or a free point, a point that we haven't designated where it needs to be, I would use sign. If you're given a question, if you have a question like 8, where you're given a midpoint and an extrema, you could use either one. It doesn't really matter. I would use sine over cosine though, because you get the h and the k for free.
Now I'm gonna.
Okay.
Use the AMP because, like,
The amplitude just is the absolute value of a.
that's it, that's what we use it for.
So that's what the amplitude gives us, is that a should be plus or minus the amplitude.
Where do we put that in when we're doing like y equals? Oh, never mind.
It's the coefficient
Yeah, I got it.
in front. Okay?
I don't want it.
I know you don't, but we're doing it.
I wanted to say,
Can I go to the bathroom before we start?
Of course, why not? Who else needs to use the bathroom? Go ahead.
Same, but
Huh?
low key, I
Just wait, just wait. Oh my god.